Your voice, your opinion, your community. Fact TV, free speech, protected.
Good morning, Bellows Falls, and welcome to the feed. It's Mike and Marty. I guess this is our first one of spring, isn't it?
It is the first one of spring, and what a beautiful spring
man.
we've had so far.
Yeah, it's really, today is popping. It's really nice. Sap's flowing again, people are boiling, so it looks.
I don't think people are boiling, the sap might be boiling.
That's true, the sap is boiling. People are boiling sap. I don't know, the temperatures are raging downtown, so we'll see. Today we have Leslie Goldman with us. She's our legislator. She's going to talk with us about what's happening up in Montpelier, and it's actually happening at her house, I guess. So, Leslie, good to talk with you. How have you been?
Good morning, Marty, and good morning, Mike. I'm seeing both of me. This is so interesting. It's new. I can't wait till we can be in person. I'm really looking forward to that. Maybe in June. How about that? July?
Yeah.
I don't know. So I can give a little bit of a summary if that would be helpful.
That would be great, because this is crossover week, right? Or was last week crossover week?
Yeah, we're sort of right in the middle of it. This, of course, is my first crossover, and obviously my first crossover on Zoom, so it's been very interesting and very challenging. I just want to say that I think the last time I was on, there were like 200 bills that had been introduced into the House, and now we're up to 435.
Wow.
So there are bills, flying, I'll say, onto the walls. And, just picture the wall as being this giant bulletin board where all the bill summaries go up. And then the next step would be to take that bill off the wall, which means the committee is going to take it up. And when the committee takes it up, it does a deep dive into the policy for my committee, healthcare, the policy implications of the bill, and then pass it on to the money committees, which might be appropriations or ways and means. If it's tax involved, it goes to ways and means. If it's just money involved, it goes to appropriations. So that's what's been going on. The bills can range from this tiny little impact to, maybe 120 people. A good example would be the Dr. Dinosaur expansion, which came out of healthcare, which is having Dr. Dinosaur expand to give benefits to pregnant women and children who are undocumented. And it's estimated about 120 people a year. Well, I have to say that the testimony we took on this bill was so moving. These people are undocumented, but they're here because they're working on our farms. And we have to really remember that role. It's very important for our farm economy to have people here doing these jobs, but they're coming from other places and frequently not documented. Now, what happens, of course, is people who don't get prenatal care can have trouble with pregnancies, and then the babies, who are born have more difficulties. We want healthy pregnancies, we want healthy children. The children who are born here are our citizens, so we do have responsibility to them too. So that was a really tiny bill affecting only 120 people. When we voted it out of committee, everyone agreed to it, so it was 11-0, which means everyone voted yes, and there were tears, because it was so moving to be able to do something so concrete for this very small population.
That's great.
On the other side of the whole thing is the transportation bill, for example, and that's really trying to deal partly with climate change, in that in Vermont, 44% of our carbon emissions come from our transportation sector, so there's a lot of energy going into electrifying in many, many different ways. So the transportation bill is a huge bill and will affect many of us if we choose to get involved with it. Another really important bill is the child care bill. Huge, right? We learned in COVID that the importance of good child care, and that when that's not available, then people can't come to their jobs and do the work that we need in our economy. So the child care bill is huge. That's coming up this week. And the goal is that no family would pay more than 10% of their income for childcare. Because there are some families, especially on the poor side, they're paying 40% of their income on childcare. It's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a really important bill. So as I say, the bills that we deal with can range from a tiny small slice of our population to affecting an enormous slice. The end of the week is going to be budget, which is, sort of reconciling the House's interpretation of the governor's budget, adding, reallocating. I haven't seen it yet, so that's coming through appropriations this week, and then we'll take a look.
Yeah.
So it's a big week. Big week.
That sounds incredible. So out of the 435 bills that like you say hit the wall, when they condense down, well, how many will be there? I mean, is it going to be 20? Is it going to be 100? I guess it depends on the size, like you said. If it's something you can deal with quickly, then you deal with it. I mean, how does that work?
That's so new to me. So that's a great question. I was looking at some other years, and I recently saw some data that had like 500 bills. I think this might have been in 19, and about 200, I think, came off the wall, but I'm not really sure about that. So if a third come off, I think that's a lot. I don't even think maybe that much.
Well, that's a lot.
It's interesting what does come off. I mean, we had a huge controversy this week about raw milk. I don't know if you saw anything about that.
No.
Man, that was a big fight. But everyone compromised, and the bill was passed through the House, and that was a good thing. The bill was supposed to support farmers getting raw milk to farm stands and being able to sell it off their farms.
Right.
Raw milk, of course, means not pasteurized, and there are concerns about infection that may be associated with that. But the recommendations are following state guidelines and veterinarian guidelines, and we felt comfortable with that. There was a small group who felt the guidelines weren't strict enough. There was a lot of conversation and debate and compromise, and the bill did go through. So it's, supporting our farmers, particularly organic farmers. So, but you never know where the controversy is going to show up. I saw raw milk, I read the bill, made sense. All of a sudden, we're in the middle of a huge debate with amendments. Who knew?
Yeah, I would have been surprised too, because I know raw milk is a thing now that everybody. I mean, it's not like people want raw milk. It's not. Back when I was a kid, everybody was like raw milk.
Ooh, stay away from it. Now it's
Yeah.
like it's really what you should be drinking.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. So when you say there's 435 bills are on the wall, and only some of them come off, so there's some that never even get to debate. Nobody's interested, or how does that? Okay.
That's right. Nobody's interested.
Okay.
It depends, like bills coming through, like we have 2 bills that just came through the Senate. So from crossover, we meaning healthcare, House healthcare. So we'll be taking up those Senate bills and decide if we agree, we want to amend, or we decide we may not want to take it up. If we decide we're not going to take it up, the bill dies. So a lot of bills just die on the wall. Well, keeping in mind that this is the first year of the biennium, so we will have an opportunity, once we get through the budget, to look at what's on our wall and decide what we really want to pursue. A lot of it will come from constituents too, what do they care about? And then the second year of the biennium also is an opportunity to take up new bills, old bills. Once the biennium is over, if it doesn't pass through the biennium, it's dead and has to be reintroduced.
Oh, okay.
But does not have to be reintroduced in the current biennium. So everything's fair game until the end of the biennium.
Okay.
What are you finding? I know that you do constituent meetings. In fact, you have one coming up this Saturday, right? March 27th. So what are you finding that are hot topics locally that you're talking to your constituents about?
I'm finding those meetings so fun. It's just really an opportunity to have tough conversation, and I really like that. The bills that came up in our last meeting was a bill called hounding. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but it was sort of addressing the practice that some hunters will put radio collars on their dogs and then send them off to go hunting. And then once they get this, particularly with bears, And then they tree the bear, and then, it seems like it's a really unacceptable practice. So in the meeting, that was at the end of February, we talked about what they could do about this bill. It is still on the wall, or was, as of that time, in natural resources, fish and wildlife. So we just talked about what they could do. Contact committee members, those kinds of, make phone calls and write, and just keep the commissioner, I don't think he's a commissioner actually, maybe assistant, I can't remember, who's in charge of that, and put pressure on and trying to get them to take up that bill. So that was an example. There was a second one that we talked about. Yeah, there's a commission too, so we talked about who was on that. I can't remember, there was a second thing that we spent time on that I'm sort of not remembering at the moment. Yeah.
Okay. What'd you say, because the other sort of, I guess, an external impact is that they passed the House and Senate at the national level, passed the COVID-19 bill, and there's money coming into the state in a pretty big amount. How is that going to go into this? Are you guys apportioning that this year? Is that how that's working?
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting about this, there have been three sort of bundles of money. They call them tranches, which is a new word to me.
That's
of money that came into the state. The first was, I don't know, maybe a year ago, the COVID relief fund, so CRF. And then the second one came in December, and now this is the third one. What's unique about this one is that we have 3 years to spend it. The first two was very narrow window, and that made it harder to be thoughtful because you didn't want to leave any money on the table. It would go back to the feds. So there was a lot of action that had to happen right away. With this sum of money, which is enormous, at least $1.7 billion. I mean, $1 billion, right? I mean, who thinks about that? No, this is all new to me. So it's being sort of focused on infrastructure things that it's one-time money, so you can't build things that will then need ongoing funding. So there's a lot of conversation about building infrastructure for broadband, building our childcare system so that the infrastructure is there and then decisions go on about how to manage it. The transportation system, once again, building things so we can do car charging stations and have them all over the place. So a lot of this money is going into infrastructure support. Of course, the pension problem is an enormous problem in our state right now. Trying to see how some of that money could help relieve that. And there's a lot of conversation going on at the state level about that. So all this money is going to be distributed in a way that will support Vermonters into the future by building infrastructure to start with anyway. Yeah. It's great.
Yeah, it's I guess because I guess like you brought up childcare, but also broadband has been proven to be the big bugaboo as far as remote education goes. Is if you don't have good broadband, you can't do remote education very well.
Yeah, broadband you can look at it from 2 points of view. One is you need access to broadband, which means sort of that last mile hookup, which companies have not been willing to do. And then the second piece is that you have access to that so that you could afford it. So if it's too expensive, you may have it, but it doesn't matter, you can't afford it. And then the speeds are crucial. So they're setting speed limits of, data going up and down that are meaningful so that, like you say, Mike, that people can do education and their work, that two people in the family or whatever it takes to do their lives can do it from home. So, they're developing something called, I don't know if you've heard of this, the CUDs, or the Communication Union Districts, which are sort of a municipal entity. And the way to get involved is select boards choose to be involved. In Wyndham 3, none of the select boards have chosen to be involved, and I was very curious about that, so I started to go deep into it, and I found out that really in Wyndham 3 our access is really very good. So
some of us would disagree.
Mike's disagreeing with
I
that.
would disagree with that, but I live out in the sticks, and it's like mine might be a last mile problem, but it's pitiful. Anyway,
But there is money to deal with people who do, are suffering like you are with the last mile, and to try and get it in, and also to try and get the speeds, like I'm saying.
Right. Well, I know my daughter's an engineer and she works at home, and they transfer these massive files. And
Sure.
but she has great. She's on. I can say VTEL. I can say VTEL without being. They are also. We transmit on VTEL, so that's a good thing. But she's on VTEL, and it's just like she has better access than people in New York City or. I mean, her company is based in Rhode Island, and they told her, well, you probably won't be able to work from home. And she said, well, here, let's try it. And they were like, holy cow, you're faster than we are. So, yeah.
Right. Look, totally get it. We in retail also, we feel very lucky. So we
Yeah.
did our test. It's amazing.
Yeah.
They got a grant, right? So, like you can't help but think about electrification in the 30s, and this is a similar thing. It's a public good. So we have to make it available, and I want to see how that can happen.
Yeah, I'm jealous now. You have VTEL.
Yeah.
Golly. Yeah, I was reading this morning. I was just reading about that, the CUDs or whatever they're calling them.
Yep.
Yeah. We don't have one in this. There's one for there's one in Bennington and on that side of the state. And it sounds like there's one up toward Rutland, but I don't think there's one in this district right now.
Yes, there is. It's actually called Deerfield Valley.
Oh, okay.
CUD, yeah. DOV, no, DV fiber, Deerfield Valley fiber. We're in that CUD. But as I say, none of the select boards in our district have agreed to participate.
Okay.
So that would be that pathway. But as I said, a lot of people have VTEL, a lot of people have access, so it's not as much of a problem here as it is sort of in rural, the western part of the county.
Right.
Trying to think of some towns that are out there, but you know what I mean.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems like the broadband, we had an unprecedented need for it, and the infrastructure wasn't there. So now we have the time to fix it if there's a problem moving forward. So it seems like that would be a very high priority for use of federal funding.
Yeah, and so another thing that we were just talking about is, do you think that because there's been some talk over the weekend and just the latter part of last week about Vilas Bridge again. Do you think that might be, yeah. Do you think that might be?
Looks like to get some work done on that. Yeah, absolutely. And, thank you for bringing that up. It's important. Senator White has been in contact with the Transportation Secretary. I think the select board is getting involved. Bonnie North has been appointed. So yeah, I think this is an opportunity to keep the pressure on.
Oh, that's great. That's good news.
Yeah.
And then, what do you see as far as one of the things we talked about in the last week is Bellows Falls may become a site for testing autonomous vehicles. I would see that tying in with the electrification too, because I imagine those vehicles will be eventually electric.
I think they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's really interesting, we live in rural Vermont on a dirt road, small piece, luckily. We do have a RAV because it's high, and we bought it because my husband and I are getting older and we wanted every single safety feature we could have so that we don't have So yesterday we were driving into the garage and my husband pulled up a little closer than the car thought it should, and it put the brake on itself. And I was like, okay, this is cool. So autonomous vehicles were sort of almost very close to driving as it is right now. So it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out.
Good. So things are crossing over. What are the big healthcare bills that are in your committee now that you're putting out or that you're interested in?
Yeah, I think the bills that are really important to us right now are the Dr. Dinosaur expansion, as I said. And then there's H210, which is a bill to address health disparities that have been exposed by COVID, particularly for people of color, LGBTQ people who have much higher rates of COVID positivity, have a great deal of disparity with health measures and outcomes. So that's a big bill. I think it's going to come to the floor this week. I'm not sure.
I forgot to turn
it
it
does
on.
have an allocation, and it's going to be coming through to get set up by the Office of Racial Equity. Yeah, it's good. It's a big bill.
Yeah.
I think people are really too, well, there's another bill. This is kind of an interesting story. Once again, these bills come off the wall and you think it's trivial. So something came off and it was like, allow mental health counselors out-of-state mental health counselors to treat Vermonters, and you needed a bill to authorize payment. So that came off the wall and it was kind of uninteresting. I mean, I thought it was a good thing, of course, that, let's say your student is in California and they have a mental health counselor and they come home to Vermont because there's a pandemic and you want them to continue to have their therapy, and that's a good thing. So that seems pretty straightforward. So then all of a sudden we have testimony from the Office of Professional Regulation, the Vermont Medical Society. The question did come up, it was kind of on the down low, about, well, what about everybody else who might be practicing? But we didn't really think about it. Then those people come in and testify, and then what comes out of it is a work group to study the entire problem of out-of-state providers providing care for Vermonters.
Yeah.
And that really struck me so much about this was that the Office of Professional Regulation, the director who came to testify, all she talked about was making sure that Vermonters were safe. And I just love that, that was her overarching goal. So what came out of this very tiny thing was a work group to really study the future of medicine, if you really think about it, because boundaries are blurred because we have virtual communication. And
right.
How is medicine going to look in the future? And we have to be sure Vermonters are safe in this new world. So that was actually pretty interesting, and it was presented, it passed through the House, it's now gone to the Senate. So that was an important bill. There have been some mental health bills. We talked a lot about the Middlesex facility, which was a facility for residential housing for a certain population who are coming out of the more intense level 1 beds. Spent a lot of time on that as well, and passed that on to institutions.
Well, we have about 3 minutes left, and I wanted to make sure we got to talk about your next constituent meeting, how people can get on, and when it's going to be. So it's March 27th, right?
It's March 27th, that's this coming Saturday, right? From 10 to 11. If you go to my website, lesliegoldmanvt.com, you'll see right at the top, the first page, an opportunity to register. It's pretty simple.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. And going back to, I could understand where that licensing thing with out-of-state providers could be, that's big. That's really amazing. Yeah.
That's what's so interesting. It sounds so weedy. I hear myself talking about it. It's like, who can follow along with this stuff when we hear all this testimony and there are 25 people talking and oh my God. But, it ends up being really important.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's about all the time we have today.
Yep.
We might have a couple minutes left. Is there?
I think you answered all my questions. I think, no, I think it's great that there's a lot of money coming in. I think it's great you have 3 years to spend it. So as you said, you can be thoughtful about it and prudent. And I think that's, I think things are looking up.
I do too. And I want to thank you again for coming
Yeah.
on, because it's so nice to be getting, all this word and everything from the source instead of, either having to read it in the paper or having it filtered through someone else. We really appreciate you coming on. Thank you, Leslie.
Thanks, Leslie.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's really good to talk to you guys. People could contact me through the website or call me. My phone number's in there. So I can do what I can, knowing what I know about the state system to help out.
Okay. And that's it for this week. We'll see you
next week
at the end of the month. And
Yep.
goodbye, Bellows
Bye.
Falls. Take it easy. Goodbye, Rockingham.
Good to see you guys.